First, I want to say I've really appreciated the speakers who preceded me. I've listened with great attentiveness, and I look forward to hearing the remainder of the speakers. And I thank the Society for bringing such a diverse group of thinkers and, more importantly, doers together for this time. I want to share a little experience with you, and then I want to turn towards how that might apply in Puerto Rico. Let me take you back in time just a little bit to a community in Georgia called Sandy Springs. It's just north of the city of Atlanta, which you may have heard of, maybe not Sandy Springs. The time is 1 minute after midnight, December 1st, 2005. In a room about the size of this, the newly sworn in and elected city council and mayor are seated for the first time. To their left is the city attorney, the city clerk, and the interim city manager. And I'm going to return to him in a moment. Out in the audience, it is packed. In the middle of the night, it is standing room only. People of the community want to be there for what to us was a historic moment. Our new city, which we had pursued for over a quarter century, was finally happening. Inside that room, in front of each of the council and mayor, was a laptop loaded with their agenda, with ordinances, statutes, codes that they had to pass right then to establish the legality of our city. Outside that room, at that moment in the succeeding days, people were starting to repair roads, to manicure parks, to do recreation programs, to design transportation systems, to engineer them, to do code enforcement, planning, to administer, to do purchasing, accounting, setting up the court system. Tomorrow, by the way, this room will be a court. We will have dual use. IT, supporting everything. Human relations, information services. And we were very big on that because we wanted a very transparent city. Up on the screen behind the council, all of their agenda is published. It's there. It's available to the public. They can get it off the internet later. It's a fully functioning city in 1 minute. And it has 2 government employees for a city of 100,000 people. How is that possible? Well, let me now take you even further back in time and let me focus a little bit on that interim city manager, who, by the way, is unpaid. He's a volunteer. Well, he didn't volunteer, he got drafted. That interim city manager is me. Some years earlier, we had been petitioning, lobbying, cajoling, whatever you want to call it, the legislature of Georgia to let us simply vote on having a city for over 25 years. And the ruling party, which had been in power for over 100 years, each year routinely rejected us for political reasons that I don't have time to even begin to go into. It might make you throw up anyway. So we were used to being rejected. I went on the committee that had been formed to organize a city about 8 years earlier. One of the first questions I asked was, well, if we got a city, how would it be organized? What would its duties, responsibilities be? And really, no one quite knew. We were just focused on getting the bill passed. So I said, well, we got to do something. They said, well, we need to form a charter commission. Why don't you do that? So I did. I chaired it. It was a great exercise in democracy. It was almost like much smaller scale, writing the Constitution. We researched it, we studied it, we debated fiercely, and we came out with a charter for our city, which became part of the legislation, which kept being rejected. Finally, in the year 2002, there was a political revolution, and the opposition party took the governorship in the Senate. And we became very excited, thinking, we may now get our bill. And I asked another question. You know, if we ever got the bill passed, how would we actually start this city? And nobody really knew. So I went home from that meeting in frustration, took out a yellow legal pad, and created a plan to start a city. A list of the functions and services we needed, critical paths, timelines, all of that scribbled on a yellow pad. Brought it in, committee passed it, the bill failed. Next year I put a new date, committee passed it, the bill failed. 2004, the revolution was completed. The opposition party took the House of Representatives, which had been blocking this bill for so long, and we now were going to have the opportunity to vote on the creation of a city. There were a couple of problems, though, still with the bill. One was timing. The bill wasn't passed till May. The city had to be started December 1st. We had really zero time. They asked me to, because of the plan I had done, to take responsibility for it. And I said yes on two conditions. I need a title. Call me something, because I need to talk to mayors and other people in leading other cities around here. Give me a title so I can do that. And they, no problem, you can be interim city manager, no pay. And the second request they didn't take so lightly. I said, you know, we have no time. We cannot run this by committee. If you want me to do it, get out of the way. I'm going to have to make decisions quickly. Very reluctantly, they agreed to that, because I don't think they really believed me at that point, what I meant. But timing was a problem, but the real problem was no one coming from the bill was granted any authority to do anything. You could not hire anyone, you could not buy any equipment, you could not lease anything until the moment the city was started, and then you had to have a fully operational city. How do I go from midnight, November 30th, no city, to 1 minute later, fully operational city? We did it. And here's the incredible news that no one would have believed. We did that with only those two government employees. Everything else we contracted primarily to private industry, over everything except public safety, basically, contracted to private industry. Now, I will say to you that that has been an enormous success. I'd like to define what I mean by success in a moment. But it has been now, it's been in existence for 12 years. One of the indications of that success is that we have been followed now. It had been 50 years since a new city had been created in Georgia. We have now created 9 more since then, following in our footsteps. Most of them following the model that I created for the use of private industry. The most broad scope of public-private partnership in terms of operational services that existed at that time, and to my knowledge still exists at this time. I was principal advisor to the first half dozen of those cities, and so they did follow the model. One of the things, in addition to the authority problem, the governor was, according to the bill, to appoint a governor's commission to assist with the formation of the city, but unfortunately, it had no authority. Governor appointed 5 people, being a politician, 4 of them had never had anything to do with the city. 2 of them didn't even live there, and the 5th one was myself. His staff asked me to convene the meeting. I convened it on June 29th. Now less than 5 months before we have to have a city. 2 important things happened at that meeting. First of all, primarily because I was the only one who knew anything about what was going on, they elected me chairman. And as soon as they did that, I walked over and placed on their desk a set of RFPs about that big, and I said, you have to pass these without reading them, a la Pelosi. And they were a smart group of people, they passed them. I issued them the next morning. These RFPs describe the scope of service that we required from private industry to provide all of our services, again, except public safety, police and fire, et cetera. It was interesting. No company had ever done this. A sort of amusing incident that happened is one company that had sent 2 vice presidents to talk with me, had lunch with them. They told me months later that they went out of the restaurant, looked at each other and said, one of them said, did you hear what that fool said? He wants to bid out the entire city. And that was the general attitude of people at that point, is what is this fool doing? But it was the only way that I could see, and because I had no government background whatsoever, I had to rely upon my corporate background, and I knew and know what resources private industry can bring to bear if it wants to. I had written to 24 major international, national companies, asked them 2 questions. And you always write to the CEO or president for something like this. You don't start at the bottom. I knew that from my corporate life. 2 questions. Here are the 12 specific areas of service I've identified, some of them quite broad. Where have you done any of these for any city or any government, in fact? And the second question was a real lulu. It was, will you spend the millions of dollars and resources necessary to start our city without a contract? And those of you who are in business, do contracts, know that that would not warm the heart of a CEO. Surprisingly, I got 12 real answers, most all of them answered, but 12 answers in which they described where they had done one or more of these services. No one had come close to providing all these services. But it gave me faith that between them all, I could find somebody to do this thing. I went to my basement and began to draw up those RFPs that I was ready to give to the Governor's Council. By the way, it works out fairly nicely when you're the interim city manager proposing things to yourself as chairman of the Governor's Commission. It really smooths out communication, better even than blockchain. It really does. So we issued the RFPs on June 30th. We spent several months in doing a thorough selection process with a committee that I had appointed and chaired. And we came back on September 14th with a recommendation of a company to do all of our services. The Governor's Council could not approve it. It could only approve of it and agree to pass it on to the future City Council when it met at 1 minute after midnight on December 1st. So that's the way the city was born, as out of necessity primarily. We went to private industry. We have never regretted it. The other cities that have followed have also been successful. But I said I would define success. Very simply in my mind, the success of a city is efficiency. The measure is efficiency and responsiveness. And part of the responsiveness is something we've been talking about a bit this morning. It's bringing government as close to the people as you can. When we were a part of a county as an unincorporated, we had one representative for every 180,000 people. Our representative didn't even live in our community. When we became a city, we had one representative for every 15,000 people, and there was no one who lived more than 2 miles from a constituent in their territory. I used to say, as I went around talking about this, we could get our hands around their throats. That leads to good government, when you can do that. So, efficiency, how did the city do? Well, we didn't raise taxes to start the city. We have not raised taxes 1 mil in the 12 years it's existed. We have improved services across the board. Every national and internal survey we've done places us in the top 10, often, certainly the top 25% of cities in the nation. As a startup, it's pretty good. Right through the recession, we were able to determine that 20% of our operating budget would go to capital improvements. So we didn't have to borrow it to do roads or parks or anything. We funded it from our operating budget, the savings that we got from operating with a private company. We estimated we had done a good budget job. We knew what it would cost us, and we did it the bureaucratic way like other cities around us. We know we saved at least 25% on that, and we were able to apply that to things like capital improvements. But here's the real beauty, I think. You know, so many cities have failed, local governments, because of pensions, liabilities, unpaid liabilities. After 10 years, we had 0 long-term liabilities for debt or for pension plans. 0, when we will never have any for the pension plans, because we've shifted all that burden to private industry. We finally had to borrow $200 million 2 years ago because we're going to entirely build our downtown, rebuild it with new facilities. They cut the ribbon on that Monday. It was a great moment for our city. The good news that goes with the fact that we finally had to borrow money, though, is that we got a AAA bond rating from the rating agencies. I am told there are only 19 cities in the country with AAA ratings. For a new city to achieve that, I think is remarkable commentary on the fiscal responsibility. So I am saying to you that there is a role for private industry in local government. Some ways local government is the most important government. It's the closest to us. It's the one that has the most influence on our life. We should be shifting to this alternative all across the country. Only one thing stands in the way of it. It's called politics. You cannot find a seated elected official who wants to stick his neck out and say, let's do something that different. But I've studied cities all over the country and even internationally, and it typically is a savings of around 10 to 40% of the operating budget for the services that come under private industry. Now, what's that got to do with Puerto Rico? Well, first of all, I think I heard you have 87 municipalities here. I would say that every one of them ought to be looking at an alternative of using private industry to operate its government. But secondly, I think it leads us on to some bigger thoughts than just doing local government. Economy is a problem in Puerto Rico. I hear you're losing population. You're losing population because you don't have good jobs for the people. You don't have good opportunities. You've got to build an economy. You can't go to a conference like this without hearing about Hong Kong and Singapore. And we treat the growth stories in those with a great deal of awe. We're sort of like they're unique and they can't be replicated. Well, let me tell you, we can have a Singapore in the Western Hemisphere. Or we can have a Singapore in Puerto Rico. All it requires is that we follow the model. A model of limited government, a model of low regulation, a model of low taxation, a model of social welfare, caring about the people, providing employment. All we have to do is really follow those few simple principles, and we can have a Singapore in Puerto Rico. Tom talked about, stole my thunder a little, he talked about Roosevelt Roads, the naval base. I visited there in 1962 as a young naval officer before most of you all were born, even some of you gray-haired ones. Deep port, Hong Kong, Singapore. Airfield, Singapore. Good area, existing infrastructure, a hospital, roads, utilities. It's perfect to establish the free city, a contract city that you have heard others, such as Titus, talk about. It's an ideal location. go beyond maybe, Tom, the special economic zone, but let's talk about a city-state. And it's possible we're working hard to do that in other places. And I will guarantee you it will be more efficient and more responsive and economically an engine of growth here in Puerto Rico. And it doesn't have to be Roosevelt Roads. It could be any number of possible sites there. But that's an ideal one because it's almost like a green field, except everything is there. Go in and turn on the lights, and we have a city. And we have, because it is low taxation, low regulation, business friendly, we have a city that can create an economic boom for Puerto Rico, and then we replicate that across the country, and we've got Singapore here in the Western Hemisphere. We have, sitting in this room in the last couple of days, all of the talent that we might need to do Singapore. Tom Bell is the foremost legal mind in working in the area of free cities. No question. Titus Gabo is one of the foremost conceptualists and manager, practical manager, that we would need to do Singapore. Eric Bremen in the capital markets, knows investors, could bring private capital to Puerto Rico if the conditions are right. Michael Strong, good Lord, Michael could sell ice to the Eskimos. We got a marketing man here. Joe Quirk, going around the world in circles, selling seasteading, knows how to do public information, another part of raising the capital we might need. All of the people who talked about entrepreneurship in Puerto Rico, all of them would bring something to the table in that regard. We've had talks about education, the need for that. All this talent is here. It seems to me that we're lacking only one thing, and that's some big hitters in Puerto Rico. We've got to reach out and find some movers and shakers in Puerto Rico to add to that team. And we've got everything we need to make a booming success in Puerto Rico. That may be the role for startup societies. We need to take the best of everything that we've heard here, put it together, sort it out, shake it down, put it together into a concise package, and find a way to take that to Puerto Rico, to the leaders there, and convince them that this is the way to go. It's time to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Federal funding does not create an economy. Federal funding is great in a disaster. You need it, you deserve it in Puerto Rico. Fix the problems, but it will not create your economy. Only private investment, private industry can create a boom in the economy. So we've got to utilize that tool, just as we did in Sandy Springs. You may say to me, you listen, well, you know, the guy's nuts. Singapore and Puerto Rico, it's going to happen. Well, let me tell you this. 90 days before that city council sat down, in a city of 100,000 people, 99,998 did not believe that we could start a city with 2 employees. My wife agreed with me. That's all. 150 days before that event, there was not a company in America, and by the way, we were looking at international, across the world, who would have said, we can do that. We can go in and run your city for you. Both were wrong. So if you think I'm crazy about Singapore, you may be wrong too. I believe that harnessing this much talent, this much energy, the strength that private industry can bring, and the strength that a free economy can bring, can indeed salvage the very best of Puerto Rico. Now I'd like to stop and ask you 4 questions. Do I have time?
Let's do 2 questions.
2 questions. Anyone have any? Yes, sir.
With the public-private partnerships, is there any concern that arises over the people employed by the firms that are contracted to the government, then either unionizing or forming some sort of political bloc that then lobbies the city council to ensure that the contract?
Sure. The question, for those of you who couldn't hear, about employees, existing employees, for instance. Well, in the case of a new city, we didn't have existing ones, but we were displacing, or should have been displacing county employees who had previously been providing our services. Turns out that a year after we had taken away 11% of the service costs from the county, they still had not cut a single person off the payroll. But that was their fault. They should have. In an existing city, of course, we do run into concern by the existing employees. That's natural. I give them full credit for being scared about that. The people I don't give any credit to are the elected officials who look past the potential benefit to their citizens and think about their own seats. So yeah, employees, probably most of them would, about 80 to 90% be retained by the company. The company wants good and experienced employees. What it doesn't want is that 10 to 20% that's deadwood. And in every bureaucracy, you have those. Every bureaucracy has deadwood. A company, people say, well, wouldn't this large corporation have deadwood? Well, some degree, but there's a difference. There's a thing called a profit motive, and the company is going to want to, motivate people. One of the greatest benefits that really hadn't thought about as we started our cities was that the morale of the employees who came to us from existing bureaucratic governments skyrocketed. They would tell me that for years I tried to tell someone how I could do my job better, and nobody cared, and I finally gave up. I came here, and this company is begging me for ideas because guess what? It wants to make a profit. So that's a powerful, powerful tool. But yes, employees will naturally oppose this, and you have to do a lot of things to convince them that, in fact, if you make the cut, you're going to be better off. You're going to have better salaries, you're going to have better benefits, you're going to have training. In fact, you're going to have safety. Many of the cities and counties I've dealt with had terrible safety records, and the company won't do that. Again, they can't afford to. So does that somewhat satisfy? Thank you. Yes, sir.
There was a pretty interesting discussion years ago about, it was Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
That extensively privatized
They did.
a lot of services. And the audit, they indicated 2 years later that there was that big because how well the city was off, whether we were better off.
Yeah, I've never looked at their results. I can tell you that we certainly have audited our results, and we know what we're doing. It is a very open city. The citizens, as I said, are very happy with it. That's terribly important. The not having increased taxes in all these years through a recession, building a reserve, having no debt, you can't beat it.
What's the name of the city again?
Sandy Springs, Georgia. There are now 9 additional cities. We now are serving over 500,000 people in these new cities. All of the largest county of Georgia, Fulton County, about 900,000 population, is now incorporated. Before we did this, only about half of it was actually incorporated, most of that being within the city of Atlanta, which splits the county in half. So it's a success story, I think, by any measure. I encourage you, if you're here in the States and are in a local community, to get your leadership to look into this. I'm available. I do studies for them, and I will tell you I have a rather unique offer. If I do a feasibility study and it shows significant savings, the next step, of course, is going to an RFP. That's when you really know how well off you are, when you get a bid in. I say to cities, I will do the entire RFP process for you, which is pretty laborious. I will help you with the selection process. I will help you get bidders. I'll help with the final contract. I'll even help with overseeing the installation of the new contract for free. All I want is 1% of your savings. That's 100% you wouldn't have had. You're going to keep 99, and all I want is a lousy 1%. But that could be a lot of money, because I have studied cities that could produce, one that would produce 150,000 would produce $162 million in savings over the life of the contract. That could be, good money. But
anyone take you up on that?
No one has taken me up yet. Because guess what? It's like a county commissioner. I did the RFPs and all of that for one county in Georgia, very poor county, poor service, poor income. They produced, I didn't think we could bring any savings there. It was such a poor budget. But I didn't think I could get a company to bid on it, in fact. Got 7 companies to bid. The company we selected had an actual decrease in budget under the contract of 10%. They voted it down 4-3. One of the county commissioners said, on the record, been doing it this way for 100 years. I don't see no reason to change now. That is an intelligent man. But the good news here is the swing vote, who never gave a reason, is in jail. And not because of his dealings with us, but for other malfeasance. So it's a difficult political battle. Whoever said Puerto Rico would be an easy battle either. But it's time that we take, I believe in the special economic zones, or by whatever name, but I think it's time to take a step beyond that and totally create a city-state, a free city for people that will totally provide an economic boost to the country, to the territory. So I think that's it. Thank you.